Hey you guys, so I know that I promised you the Avatar video, but I just have so much to say and I'm still writing it. So I figured in the meantime, even though I know it's incredibly late, I'm going to tell you about the best books that I read in 2023. I'm going to try and get through this list fairly quickly so this video isn't too long, but yeah, I have kind of 10 book slash series here that I'm going to talk about, and then I have a couple honorable mentions as well. So the first series that I want to talk about is the Mask of Mirrors trilogy by M.A. Carrick. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I can be kind of persistent about books. Like some of my favorite books have taken me like upwards of 4 or 5 tries to actually get into, and this was one of these. I tried reading Mask of Mirrors, I think 3 times, and DNF'd it each time. But on the third one, I finally got through it, and for whatever reason, it just clicked, and I devoured the whole trilogy in just like a week or so. And this is a really, really great series. I really like the world building within it. This world is kind of Venice inspired, and there are a couple different cultures represented as well. There's a group of people who are kind of akin to the Romani. And in the story, we're following our main character, Ren, and she grew up as kind of like a street rat, and she had a really, really tough upbringing, but eventually escaped, ended up working for this very rich woman named Latilia Trementis. And now Ren, with the help of her kind of sister Tess, is basically acting as a con artist and trying to infiltrate this family to get some of their money. And she gets quite embroiled with them and entangled in their political rivalries, since this is a house that is waning in its power. And because of that, she actually ends up getting quite close to them, and the story kind of goes on from there. This is a really, really great trilogy. It has like very cool dream and nightmare magic, which I thought was really interesting. There are also the numinauts, which are these, like circles drawn with compass chalk. And we get some really cool insights into kind of the different symbols and how the numinauts work. And if you're a sucker for tarot in a book, this series has a really, really cool tarot system. So I highly recommend it. The trilogy overall is called the Rook and Rose trilogy. And so there is a second character who is called the Rook. And I don't want to really spoil anything, but he kind of acts as like a vigilante Robin Hood type figure in the story. And the two of them end up getting entangled as well. And so this is a really, really great trilogy. I don't know why it took me so long to get into, but I'm very, very glad that I did. And it has a quite high rating on Goodreads, so I assume that you'll probably enjoy it quite a lot on your first try. And speaking of dream magic, the next book that I want to talk about is The Dreams of the Dying. This is a book that I saw the cover of, and I saw it talked about on BookTube a lot and absolutely loved it, but it wasn't available as an audiobook, and I never got a physical copy. And so when I saw it finally available on Audible, I picked it up immediately, and I really, really like the story as well. In the story, we're following a character, and he's kind of investigating these weird occurrences where people become trapped in nightmares, basically. They fall asleep, they can't wake up, and they eventually wither away and die. And he seems to be infected with this as well, and so he is trying to figure out what to do to solve this issue for him and for other people. Throughout the story, there are a lot of twists and turns, and there's a lot of political strife in this world, and so we see a kind of growing rebellion from the underclass in this story, but it's quite interesting the way that gets kind of flipped on its head. So I highly recommend that one as well. It's by Nicholas Lietzau, I think is his name. I'll throw up a picture right here. But yeah, this was a really, really good one. I highly recommend it. Next up, I want to talk about one that I'm a little hesitant about. This is The Book That Won't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I think the reason that I'm a little iffy on it is because I've read everything that he's written at this point, and I don't think anything he's written since the Book of the Ancestor has ever really lived up to that trilogy. And so I think I just had extremely high expectations going into this, and they didn't quite meet them for the majority of the book. But then when I got to the very, very end, that final bit of the book really recontextualized the whole story for me, and I ended up really, really enjoying it in the end. And so I'm hoping that the next 2 books in the trilogy end up just kind of elevating that experience for me. So this is a story about 2 characters. One of them is a girl, and she is from the Dusk, which is this kind of barren wasteland. In the beginning of the story, she is taken from the Dusk and arrives at the city, which seems to be kind of the last city there is. And within it, there is a massive giant library. and she becomes an apprentice at the library and eventually starts working there. And this library, it's extremely mysterious. It is holding a bunch of secrets. There are automatons that work there, and the kind of like master who she's an apprentice to seems to have some very interesting secrets as well. Then another character that we're following, he is trapped within this one specific room in the library. He and his siblings have lived there their entire lives, looked after by two automatons, and eventually these two characters kind of meet and their stories intersect in a very, very interesting way. And when you get to the end of the book and kind of discover what is really going on, it's actually quite amazing. And that's what really bumped us up from like a 3.5 stars up to a 4.5. And so I really, really did end up enjoying this, but I will say I was kind of a bit hesitant for the majority of the book. Let's talk about Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I'm a really big fan of Rebecca Kuang. I absolutely love The Poppy War, which I've got around here somewhere, right here. And Babel is an incredible book as well. I really, really, really loved Babel. I would be talking about it, except if I remember correctly, I think it came out the year before. But Yellowface was a book that I picked up just because I love the author so much, even though it's outside of the SFF genre. And this is a story about this woman named June Hayward, later June Song, and she is friends with this rising star in the publishing industry named Athena Liu, I think. And June is extremely jealous of Athena, but Athena and June eventually go out to dinner, and Athena shows June the manuscript that she's been working on. While there, Athena ends up choking and dies, and June takes that manuscript and passes it off as her own. She begins working on it herself to finish it and perfect it and edit it, and she publishes it as if it was her own work, and it is a critical success. And so then we see all the lies that she has to spin to keep the story going, that this was her own published work. And it's everybody else's fault, not hers, of course. And this was a really, really good story. I would say it's like kind of satirical, but I also heard Rebecca Kuang say that it's not quite satire because this, like, it's quite real to some stuff that she has personally experienced within the publishing industry. So, I don't know, take that with a grain of salt. But I really, really enjoyed this book. It's quite short and easy to get through. And I do kind of love rooting for a liar and a con artist. I think that's a personal flaw within me. Like, I'm a big Anna Delphi fan. I think she's great. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed Yellowface and I highly recommend it. Next up, let's talk about The Saint of Bright Gores. Unfortunately, I don't know how to pronounce this author's name, but I really, really enjoyed this. I just started watching a video of two people absolutely roasting this book. I can't remember what their channel name is, but they've done like quite long videos about like Nona the Ninth and other books like that, Nine Fox Gambit and whatnot. They hated this book. However, for me, I personally really, really liked it. This is a story about a boy, and he was raised by a mother to basically be an assassin to kill his father. This is a book that is very, very abstract and surreal, and it is set in this world where there are kind of powerful forces and gods. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but basically this character, he goes to the city, he is living under kind of an authoritarian, totalitarian type government that does huge pogroms against certain classes or groups of people and kills them or exiles them or whatever. And so he kind of gets involved in this rebellion. Along with that, there is his father, who is the religious leader of this extreme kind of cult or religion that is taking over the entire continent. And throughout the story, we see how the kind of confrontation between the two of them builds. And this is a story, it's quite weird, quite abstract, and I can totally understand if you don't like it. However, for me, I really, really enjoyed it, and I liked the sympathetic magic that was also portrayed throughout the story. I think the writing is really, really pretty, and I like the world, and I just thought it was a really, really interesting and refreshing read compared to a lot of what I typically read. And then there is Gods of the Weirdwood by R.J. Barker, or K.J. Parker. I always confuse the two of them. Which one is it? This is the author who wrote the Tide Child series, but this is the author who wrote the Bone Ships and also like Age of Assassins as well. And so I believe this is his third series. Yeah, with the Wounded Kingdom and the Tide Child series. R.J. Barker, and I really enjoyed this book. I just really like the magic in this one as well. The Northlands of Nkrua are locked in eternal winter, but prophecy tells of a chosen child who will rule in the name of their god and take warmth back from the south. Our main character is named Kahal, and he was raised to be this person, the Kalarai, the savior, and he was taken from his parents and prepared for his destiny, but his time never came. When he was 15, he ceased to matter. Another Kalarai had risen, another chosen one, raised in the name of a different god. The years of vicious physical and mental training he had endured, the sacrifices all for nothing, and he became nothing. Now it's 20 years later, and Kahal lives a life of secrecy on the edge of the Krua's giant forests, hiding what he is and running from what he can do. But he is eventually forced to reveal his true nature, and so he sets off a sequence of events that will reveal secrets that will shake the bedrock of his entire world and expose the lies that have persisted for generations. I was going to try explaining that myself, but I figured I'd just read the blurb because that does a much better job at explaining this book. But I really enjoyed this one as well. There is a lot to love about this author's writing style if you can get into it. I would say that his work is probably not for everyone, because I think it took me like 2 or 3 tries to get into the bone ships as well. That's another one. But I thought that this was a great story, and I'm super excited to see where it goes in the future. Now we are going to talk about Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is an author that you guys know that I absolutely adore. He's written probably like 30 books at this point, and I've read pretty much all of them, and I absolutely love everything he's ever done. This is the author of Children of Time, Children of Ruin, and Children of Memory, which is a very critically acclaimed series. So I picked up his book City of Last Chances, and that is the first book in the trilogy that I'm talking about right now. I actually didn't end up enjoying that one that much. I gave it like, I think 3 stars. But in that series, we are following our main character, Yasnik, and he is the kind of last and final priest of this very small god in the city. And within this world, there is an empire that is focused on kind of logic and reason, and they are trying to bring perfection to the world. And to do that, they are engaged in kind of endless wars, where they're trying to crush out the spirituality of all these various people. And they're trying to get rid of all of the gods and perfect this world. And so they have a big focus on like right speech and right action and whatnot. They're all very like regimented and rules based, and logic is their kind of prime motivator. And there's an inquisition in this world. And so I ended up not really liking the first one that much, but I do love the author, so I decided to give the second book a try. And that is called The House of Open Wounds. And this one I absolutely loved. It was so fantastic. I don't want to necessarily spoil anything, but after the events of the first book, Yasnik eventually ends up kind of smuggling some gods away from this kind of evil empire. And in the second book, he is forced into a situation where he has to work with a bunch of other magic users in the healing tent of an army. And so it's called House of Open Wounds because these magic users are basically working to heal soldiers in this massive war. And I can't really talk about it more than that, but this is kind of a military fantasy, although our characters aren't on the front lines at all. They are embedded within military camps for basically the entire story. And I don't know what the difference was exactly between the first and second book, but House of Open Wounds far surpassed the first one for me, and this was probably like my 4th or 5th favorite book of the entire year. I absolutely loved it. I think it actually technically might have come out in 2024 in like January, but I hadn't got an arc, so I ended up reading it like right before Christmas. But before we get to my top 3 favorite books of the year, here's some honorable mentions. One of them is The Adventures of Amina Ali. This is a story that I really enjoyed, and it is inspired by some Middle Eastern mythology. And this was just a really fun book. I also really love the cover. It's super gorgeous, as you can see. But this was just a really fun story. Along with that, there is Inkblood's sister Scribe. This is one that I was recommended by Bow Reads Books, who I think changed their channel name to Willow Reads, perhaps. For some reason, this book kind of reminded me of Cinda Williams Chima's books, like the Dragon Heir, Wizard Heir books that I haven't read in like 15 years, but there's something that kind of felt parallel to that. But in this book, we are basically following two sisters, as well as this boy who works as a blood scribe in this library of magical books. And we see that these two sisters are somewhat embroiled in this story. And our main character who we're following, one of these sisters, she is forced to move every year so that she is not tracked down. And there's this like one day a year where for 24 hours she has to go and leave and just travel the entire time so that she can't be found. But this year she is in a research station in Antarctica, and she decides that this year she's tired of it, she's just going to stay where she is. And that's the inciting incident of the book. She's eventually found, and then this whole kind of plot unravels because of that. So that's a really, really fun one. Also, an honorable mention is Assassin of Reality by the Dyachenkos. You know that my favorite book is Vita Nostra. I absolutely adore that book more than anything. I do love Malazan, but in terms of my favorite individual book, it's Vita Nostra. And so this was a sequel to it. I quite enjoyed a lot of the aspects of it, however it didn't quite feel complete to me, I would say. And so I'm waiting to see what happens with the third book, because I feel like that will tie kind of a better ribbon on the story and kind of delve more into some of the details that I want answers to. And then lastly, for my honorable mentions, is Echopraxia. I was recommended this by Quinn's Ideas. He releases like a lot of videos about various sci-fi books, and this was one that was just extremely, extremely interesting. In this world, there are technically like vampires and zombies as well, but not in the magical sense. Like these are people who just kind of evolved differently. And so in the story, we're following a man, and he eventually gets involved with this sect of kind of religious people who commune with this glitch in the universe, basically. And because of that, they're sent on a mission into space to kind of go find something. And along with that, there is a extremely, extremely creepy vampire and her zombies who take along on this journey. And this is just a very, very weird book. It's quite hard to explain. I'll probably do a dedicated review if you're curious to know more about it. And I'll link Queen's video up here. But this was a really, really good one as well. Anyway, for my top 3 books, two that I want to talk about are actually by the same author. They're book 1 and 2 of a trilogy. And I've already reviewed actually these. And so from the top 3 books, you probably know because I think you've seen the reviews for them. But I really, really, really loved The Blighted Stars and The Fractured Dark by Megan E. O'Keefe. I got arcs of those and devoured them instantly because they were just so, so good. I have dedicated reviews for the first book, so I'll link that as well. And so in this story, we are following Naira Sharp, who was a bodyguard for basically one of the rulers of this sci-fi world. But she eventually kind of defected and became an eco-terrorist, sabotaging the continued terraforming projects, before eventually getting kind of put on trial and her mind locked away. Because in this world, it's a post-death world where people their minds are kind of like narrowly mapped, and they can be brought back again and again in 3D printed bodies until maybe their map cracks from like repeated trauma. But for the most part, it can be brought back again and again. Along with that, we're also following Tarquin Mercator, who is the son of this ruler that Naira worked for, and it was his testimony that had her put away, basically. And so we're following Tarquin and Naira, and the two of them basically end up stranded on a dying planet together, basically, along with some other survivors from the ship that has reached this newest cradle world, which is supposed to be terraformed, but when they arrive, it's already completely killed by this like fungus called the Shroud, basically. And so they have to find a way off the planet and try to survive and figure out what happened here. And this is just a super, super fantastic story. It's extremely fast-paced. It's very, very creepy. It's not Mass Effect, but there's that one like space video game. I can't think of what it's called, but I'll find it and put it right here. But it kind of reminds me of that. But yes, I highly, highly recommend the series. I think that you'll really, really like it. And the first 2 books are currently out, and the third one should be out pretty soon because Megan O'Keefe writes extremely quickly. And then the last book that I want to talk about, which is probably no surprise to you, is The Will of the Many by James Islington, or Islington, not sure how you pronounce that. I enjoyed his Lycanius trilogy quite a bit, which I have here as well somewhere. And that trilogy was like really good, but not my favorite. But The Will of the Many is one of the best books that I've read in years. It is just so fast-paced and fun. In it, we're following a character named Vis, and this is a kind of Roman-inspired fantasy world where this empire, the Catenan Empire, which if you're familiar with Latin, catena means chains, which is just a little interesting detail. But this empire has literally conquered the entire world at this point. And the magic system there requires people to give up part of their will power to the people higher in the hierarchy than them. And so there are basically 8 ranks of people, and the higher the rank, the more will you receive from the people below you. To the point where the princeps, there are just a few of them, they are receiving will from I think like 40,000 plus people in total, and so they're capable of extreme feats of magic basically. But Viz wants no part of the system, but when he turns 18, he will have to touch the Aurora Columnae and eventually have to give up part of his will. And so he's doing everything he can to avoid that fate. But he eventually gets noticed by a senator within this empire and is adopted as a son and sent to this academy that trains all the best, the richest nobles. And he's sent to that academy to investigate the death of the senator's younger brother. And throughout that, he basically has to rise high in the ranks of the class and deal with friends and enemies and hide the secret of his true identity, which I won't spoil. But yes, it's just a really fantastic high-octane story that you can blow through in like a day if you're super invested in it. I love this book more than I've loved like any book in probably quite a while. And so this was definitely my #1 favorite book of the year. So those are my top 10 favorite books/series that I read in 2023. I hope you enjoy. And I will be back with that Avatar video when I finish writing it. I have so much to say, it's just super long. Also, along with that, I'm also going to talk about a series called Monstrous soon. This was a graphic novel that I started a while ago and then never finished, but I recently picked it up just on Friday, a couple days ago, and I've been blowing through the entire first omnibus. And it is absolutely incredible. So I'm going to be talking about that very soon as well. So those are my plans for the future, and I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you pick up some of the books that I mentioned. Have a good one. Bye.